Thank you, Madam President. I'm honored to follow my colleague and friend, Senator Murphy, in an effort that has involved both of us, our minds, our hearts, from the day that we stood together, that December 14th, 2012, in Newtown at Sandy Hook. We have stood together and worked together with the families and community that have so inspired us with their strength and courage. And if I have one overriding image and message in my mind and heart, it is those families. The families most directly affected by the deaths of the 20 beautiful children and sixth grade educators, and the families in the reverberating circle of people so deeply touched and hurt and harmed by the evil on that day. And the people who exemplified the good of that day, the first responders and the firefighters and police, who saw things that no human being should ever have to witness, and emerged also deeply hurt and harmed. The courage and strength of Newtown and that community and the families will always inspire me. I'd worked on gun violence prevention for many, many years, a couple of decades before December 14th, 2012. I was the Attorney General in the state of Connecticut and a state legislator, advocating for the assault weapon ban and other gun violence prevention measures. Then, as Attorney General, I defended the assault weapon ban when it was challenged in court. In fact, tried the case and then successfully argued it in the state Supreme Court. So I knew intellectually and abstractly why we need in this nation and in Connecticut stronger measures to stop gun violence. But the experience of that day left a searing mark on my heart and on my conscience, so that it became for me the passion and priority that it is today. And I will not rest as a member of this body and as a human being until this nation does better to make America safer and to prevent the kind of tragedy we saw on that day. I will never forget being at that firehouse on that afternoon. But I will also never forget that evening at St. Rose of Lima Church, when the community came together to light a candle rather than curse the darkness. And a conversation I had with one of the parents who lost a child. It was either that night or in the grief-filled days thereafter, when I said to her, at some point, when you're ready, I'd like to talk to you about what we can do about guns. And she said to me, I'm ready now. That's the courage that we've seen in the last 3 years from those families. It's the courage we saw this morning at an event in the Capitol. It's the courage that we've seen again and again and again from Newtown, from all over the country, loved ones and victims of all of the places they've become kind of landmarks that we recite. But there are 30,000 deaths every year from places whose names we could never recite here because it would be too long, and because they are the mundane places that all of us go. As my colleague, Senator Murphy, said this morning, all of us are just 1 second away from becoming victims. The fact is, we're all touched by gun violence, and we're all harmed and hurt by it. And I will never forget that evening. I will never forget also the day on the floor of this House when the Senate failed to approve a common sense package of gun violence prevention measures, universal background checks, a ban on illegal trafficking, a ban on straw purchases, mental health initiative. And from the gallery, someone shouted down, "Shame." It may have been "shame on you." There's no record of it because we record only what happens on the floor. But on that day, the most profound and eloquent comment was those 3 words: "Shame on you." Shame on us in the United States Senate. We are complicit by our inaction. The Congress is complicit by its silence. And moments of silence have their place, but silence by inaction here is complicity. And it's not only the failure to act, it's also the obstruction that has been placed in the way of knowledge and research. The so-called rider, nobody outside the United States Capitol would talk about riders, an amendment that stops the government from doing research, literally research, fact-gathering, investigation on gun violence. The cause of 30,000 deaths every year in this country cannot be researched by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. In fact, we face a public health crisis in this country. If it were Ebola or influenza or polio, and we face these kinds of epidemics or feared epidemics in this country, and we've reacted with drastic and effective measures, including quarantine and vaccines that mobilize a nation. The response of the United States Congress to the epidemic of gun violence is to bar research by the CDC and other public health authorities. The very same public health community that could help us understand and take action is gagged and straitjacketed by the United States Congress. Even the author of that amendment restricting research, the initial author, former Congressman Jay Dickey, Republican of Arkansas, says he has regrets. Quote, "I wish we had started the proper research and kept it going all the time," he has said. The Congress owes the American people more. But this promise I can make, which is we're not going away, we're not abandoning this effort. We will not be silenced. We will not be inactive. We're not giving up. 12 years were necessary to pass the Brady Bill after the President of the United States was almost assassinated just a few miles from here, and his press secretary, Jim Brady, was paralyzed. 12 years is what it took, with the support of the President, Reagan, and we need to be prepared for that kind of marathon, not a sprint. President Reagan said, famously, "Facts are stubborn things." We cannot deny the facts that drive this debate, because laws do work. We come here every day with the presumption that what we do makes a difference. The laws we pass make a difference. Gun violence prevention laws do work. When the shooter at Sandy Hook had to change magazines, children succeeded in escaping. If he had been barred and that assault weapon had been banned from having it and bringing it to that site of horrific tragedy, it might have made a difference. If the 72-hour rule had been enforced against the shooter in Charleston, that is, if there had been no 72-hour loophole,
Senator, the senator has used 10 minutes.
May I have consent for just one more minute?
Is there objection? Without objection.
If the shooter in Charleston had been barred, as he should have been because he was ineligible, rather than having the opportunity to purchase a weapon as a result of the 72-hour rule loophole, it might have made a difference there. We can't say for certain. We know there's no panacea, no magic solution, but the families of Sandy Hook and of San Bernardino and Colorado Springs and Roseburg and Roanoke and Charleston and Lafayette ask us to make a difference here. Honor with action is what we should do. Inaction is complicity. We owe the American people better. We need to keep faith with its values and keep faith with America. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.